Debbie Walsh is the director for the Center for American Women in Politics, a unit of the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. The center is nationally recognized as the leading source of scholarly research and current data about American women's political participation. Its mission is to promote greater knowledge and understanding about women's participation in politics and government, and to enhance women's influence and leadership in public life. Walsh is frequently called upon by the media for information and comment, and she speaks to a variety of audiences across the country on topics related to women's political participation. She earned her bachelor's degree in political science from SUNY Binghamton and earned her master's of art in political science from Rutgers, where she was an Eagleton Fellow.
Thank you, and I want to thank Krista Jenkins. There she is over there, who started her early career at the Center for American Women in Politics, getting her PhD at Rutgers, and we were delighted to have her for not as many years as I would have liked, but for quite a while. And she and my husband actually are co-authors on a book on civic engagement and youth civic engagement. So it's nice, if Krista asks me to do anything, I have to say yes. And Monique, I want to thank you for that very nice introduction, and I'm looking forward to you applying to and coming to our New Leadership program. New Leadership is a program we do at the Center for American Women in Politics for college women all over the state of New Jersey to demystify the political process. We know that young women are very engaged in service, and in fact, Krista did a secondary analysis for us about women and young women particularly and their connection to politics and civic engagement, and we saw that they're very service-oriented, and while we're really happy for them to be service-oriented, we want them to make those connections between the problems that they do the service on and politics. So we want them to be volunteering in soup kitchens and working on issues of domestic violence, but we also want them to understand that in Trenton and in Washington and even in their county seat, there's work going on connecting to those issues, and that they can have a connection to them and be part of systemic change. Anyway, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm gonna kind of combine two things, because I was gonna do one bit of a talk, and then Krista and I were on a panel about a week and a half ago for the New Jersey Political Science Association about the upcoming gubernatorial election. And I talked a little bit about how gender may play out in this election. And she said, oh no, you have to do that. So I'm gonna put a little of that in, but I also wanna talk a little bit about our research at the center, but how it connects to what's happening for women in politics. So I just want to say a couple of words about the Center for American Women in Politics. We are part of the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. We've been around since 1971, and we are the oldest nationally based university organization that studies and examines women in politics, and really the only one that looks at it from a national perspective. And we keep track of the number of women who are running for office, who are holding office, women who are appointed to office. We study how they get there. What are their paths to elective office? How are they different than their male colleagues? In effect, we really work to keep the story and the history of women's participation in politics, document it and keep it alive, and put it out there in the world so that the media is focusing on it and that scholars are focusing on it. We really want to make sure that the research that we do, whether it's on the impact of women serving in office, or how they get there, or how many there are in office, or women as voters and how women vote differently than men, informs not just the scholarly community, but also informs the activist community, because we are always committed to the concept of turning research into action. So we not only do the research piece, but we also develop programs to encourage more women's participation, including programs like our New Leadership program, our Ready to Run program, which is a nonpartisan campaign training, a national campaign that we conducted for the last 2 or 3 years called the 2012 Project, which was to increase the number of women running in 2012. We saw that as a year of opportunity because of redistricting and new and open seats at the state legislative and congressional level. We wanted to make sure that women were taking advantage of those opportunities. So we are always trying to connect our research to action. So what I wanted to share with you this afternoon is a little of what we've learned over 40 years, and I promise it won't take me as long to tell you about it as it took for us to learn it, and what we're seeing on the horizon for women in politics. So first of all, some of it is what you already know, I think, that there are really too few women in politics. We see that there are some marquee names that everybody knows. You see in the newspaper every day, Hillary Clinton, maybe not so much anymore, but maybe again soon, Nancy Pelosi, Olympia Snowe when she was in the Senate, Condoleezza Rice. You saw these names, and I think it gave a sense that it was kind of mission accomplished. We had lots of women, they're everywhere. But the reality is, when we really drill down, and not very far, you see what the reality is with the numbers. So for instance, right now, only 18% of all the members of Congress are female, 20% in the Senate, but 18% overall. Of all the state legislators in the country, only 24% of them are women. And currently, there are only 5 women who serve as governors of any state. And that's actually down from the record. The record was 9. We're down to 5. And so we're kind of struggling at that statewide elected position. Here in New Jersey, we have a kind of a mixed record. At the congressional level, we have 0 women in our congressional delegation. When Marge Rockema stepped down from office back in 2003, that was the last time we had a woman in our congressional delegation. We have a kind of a famous history of women serving in our congressional delegation, including Millicent Fenwick. But currently 0 women, which is pretty shocking for a state like New Jersey. In our state legislature, however, things are doing a little bit better. We have 35 out of 120 members. That's 29%. That means that New Jersey currently ranks 11th in the nation. Now, I mentioned before our Ready to Run program, which is our nonpartisan campaign training program for women. When we started doing that program, and for most of the 30 years that I've been at the Center for American Women in Politics, New Jersey ranked in the bottom 10 for the percentage of women in our state legislature. So we were in the bottom 10 with Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky. I mean, it was pretty dismal. But over the years, with efforts like Ready to Run, which have been working to encourage more women to run, to give them some of the tools that they need to do it, we've seen an increase in the number of women serving in our state legislature. But I would be sort of overplaying our role in it by saying that was the only reason that it's happened. I would tell you that another reason is here in New Jersey, indictments have been very, very good to women. And we have seen that in the past years, when legislators have been booted out of office for various reasons because of poor behavior, more and more the county party chairs who make the decision about who's going to run for office in our state have selected women to fill those seats. And I think that speaks to the idea that people have a sense that women bring something different to the political process, and that when the people who are making the decisions about who should run for office and who shouldn't, when they're looking for change, they've been looking to women. So that has been a good sign. In terms of statewide office, here in New Jersey, we have 2 statewide elected positions, and right now 50% of them are held by women, but that would be, I think, overstating the power that women have in statewide office. Obviously, the key position in our state is governor. The lieutenant governor comes along with the governor now in this new iteration of statewide elective office. We have had 1 woman governor in our state, and we can talk a little bit more later and also in the Q&A about what's happening in this election cycle with a woman running. The problem that we have been seeing over time, however, when you look at these numbers, is that the trend for women in office and the trend for women running for office has been pretty flat. We had slow, steady progress through the 80s and into the very early 90s. Some of you are old enough to remember 1992 and the Year of the Woman with the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas hearings, which kind of put out there in a very public way the fact that there were very few women in the United States Senate. It energized women around the country. It was also another year of opportunity with redistricting. Women took advantage of it. We had record numbers of open seats. We saw a big increase in the number of women in Congress. But since then, our numbers have been flat at the state legislative level and at the congressional level. 2012 was a good year for women. I saw that the title of this was about the Year of the Woman again, and I would say that 2012 was a good year, but I would also remind you that at the end of a very good year for women, we are at 20% in the Senate, 18% in Congress overall. We are still at 24% in our state legislature. So it's a good thing, but let's not overplay it. There's still an awful lot of work to go. So we've learned that the trend is flat. We've learned that there are not enough women there. We've also learned over the years from our research that it matters to have women in office, that women make a difference. We know that women experience the world through they have a different set of life experiences. They bring that to the policy-making table. It's why you want diversity in government of all kinds, because all of those different experiences make for different public policy. We know that women are more likely than their male colleagues, and this cuts across party lines. They are more likely to have as a priority when they serve in office issues affecting women, children, families, education issues, environmental issues. We know that among the members of the U.S. Congress, the women are more green, both the Democrats and the Republicans, than their male counterparts. We also know that women bring more transparency to the process of governing, that they believe that the process should happen in a more open and transparent way, which may be one of the reasons why, and I'm not kidding about this, maybe one of the reasons why many of the party leaders in New Jersey are not that eager to have women running, because there is something to be gained by having less transparency for those in leadership. So I think there are some reasons why that has hurt women when it comes to getting party leaders to back them. We have lots of examples of the ways in which women have changed policy and changed the lives of citizens. One of my favorites, of course, is Title IX. Title IX wouldn't have been in existence if it hadn't been for women in Congress, particularly Patsy Mink, Congresswoman from Hawaii, who started Title IX. And Title IX isn't just about women's sports. I don't know how many of the students here, the women who are students, have ever played a sport while they were in high school or in college. I know that my kids did. I know I did not. It just wasn't even available. So that has really made a difference in students' lives. But Title IX is not just about sports. Title IX is about funding for education and making sure that education funding is equal for girls and boys, men and women in college and K through 12. Equal credit. The fact that a woman today can go in and get a loan or open a credit card, get a credit card without having to ask their husband or their father to sign for it is because of a woman named Bella Abzug when she served in Congress and her cohort. It was women who made a difference. Women's health. The National Institutes for Health used to do all of their testing for drug protocols on men. Men were the operative, the testing ground, and there was an assumption that women were just smaller versions of men, and that you could just sort of cut back whatever you did for men, and that would work for women. And it was a group of women, bipartisan group of women from the U.S. House who marched over to the NIH and said, you need an office on women's health. This won't do. Their line, which I love, was that when they went to the NIH, even the lab rats were white and male. And that's really true. Before, there were women who were speaking up on the inside, and I think that's all. This is all about getting women on the inside. Safe haven bills. If a woman has a baby and can't keep the baby, the laws that are out there that make a place, whether it's the firehouse or the police department or the hospital, where you can bring a baby that you can't take care of, that you can't keep, no questions asked, as opposed to the really tragic and sad stories that we've heard of young girls who, will dump their baby in a dumpster somewhere. So that's women making a difference. Drive-by deliveries. If you think about here in New Jersey, we have Senator Loretta Weinberg to thank for this, which is that if a woman goes in to have a baby, it used to be that within 24 hours, because of insurance, she would have to be out of the hospital. And they found that, all women were having infections and they were ending up back in the hospital 2 days later, 3 days later. And she changed the law so that insurance companies are required to pay for 48-hour stay after you have a baby. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really, it's huge, and it was because of women. Paid family leave. New Jersey is one of 2 states in the country that has a paid family leave legislation. The other state is California. It started in California because of a woman named Sheila Kuehl, a state legislator there. It was a group of women in the New Jersey legislature here who championed paid family leave. And the entire reason we have family leave at all is because of Marge Rockema. Marge Rockema had the tragic experience of losing her son when he was young, and she had the luxury, from her perspective, of being able to stay home and be with him while he was sick and dying. And she was committed, when she came into Congress, that she would make sure that other families had that same opportunity. And it was her piece of legislation. She championed it for years through her, as a moderate Republican. Ronald Reagan was president. He would never sign it. It was the first piece of legislation that Bill Clinton signed when he was elected president. So these are examples of how we know that women make a difference. But we've also learned over the years that there are challenges for women, why women don't run. The one that we hear most often is just time and family commitments and work commitments. Women are still most likely to be the primary caregivers at home. They're more likely now to be working outside the home full time, taking on the job of running for the legislature or even for a city council position or a county position. It's like taking on a third full-time job. So we know that what happens is women tend to wait. They wait until they're older. Men are more likely to run when they're in their late 20s and early 30s. Women don't start running until they're in their 40s, maybe even early 50s. And therefore, their trajectory in politics is just that much shorter. So that gets in the way. I think the issue of fundraising. I think women are put off by the idea of having to raise money, and it always strikes me as incredible because I think of women as phenomenal fundraisers, and they do it all the time for other things. They'll do it for their church or their synagogue or their PTO or their Girl Scout troop or Boy Scouts, whatever the organization is, but it's not for them. And I think when you run for office, you have to be able to say, I'm asking you to invest in me, and I think that's harder for women. I talk to a lot of women who are thinking about running. That's their issue that they're afraid of. And I tell them, you're not asking for money so that you can redo your kitchen or go on a vacation. You're asking for the money so that you can represent the interests of the citizenry in whatever institution you're running for. And I think that's something that women have a hard time getting over. I think that there's the issue of negativity in politics. I think that for a lot of women, they look and it's hard to question why they would feel that way, right? I mean, you watch what's happening in Washington. You see this complete standstill. Nothing gets done. Lots of negatives in campaigns. And so a lot of women who care a lot about an issue do a kind of a work around politics. So they'll do volunteer work, or they'll work for a nonprofit organization. They'll start a nonprofit organization, but they'll do whatever they can do to actually not get engaged in the political piece, but to do it sort of from the outside in. A lot of women feel like they don't have the confidence to do it. I think partially because they look at the institutions and they don't see people that look like them in them, so they think maybe this isn't for me. Judy Shaw, who was the chief of staff to Christy Todd Whitman, another example of why it matters to have women in office. When Christy Todd Whitman came in, she appointed a woman chief of staff, the first woman and the only woman to ever be the chief of staff to a governor in the state of New Jersey. But she was working for Christy Todd Whitman and putting together all of the cabinet positions, but also there are about 3,000 appointments that the governor of New Jersey makes for boards and commissions. So there are a lot of power that the governor has to fill out state government in all of its many dimensions. And Judy was part of that transition of filling those slots. And she told us the story, and she said this rang, if it happened once, she wouldn't be repeating it, but it happened over and over again, which is she would call up somebody like Bob Smith and say, Bob, Governor Whitman would like you to serve on the asparagus board. And we actually do have an asparagus board in New Jersey. And Bob Smith would say, Judy, I want you to thank the governor for me. I would be happy to serve on the asparagus board. When is the first meeting? And she would call Susie Jones and say, Susie, Governor Whitman would like you to serve on the asparagus board. And there would just be sort of this silence. And then Susie would say, well, Judy, I'm really flattered. And I like asparagus a lot, but I feel like I need to know more about asparagus before I actually agree to do this. And I cook it a lot, but I think I should do a little research, and I need to talk to my family and my friends before I make this big commitment. And Judy said this happened over and over and over again. And it's that kind of lack of confidence that sort of I can't really just pull the trigger. A lot of folks have said that this kind of lack of confidence shows a lack of ambition for women. Some researchers have been talking about that. And I don't think that's true. I think in some ways what we do is we confuse a lack of confidence with a lack of ambition. And I think we confuse that working around government with a lack of ambition. I think it's not a not sensible way of looking at things if you look at how government has been working. What we do know about women and why they do run is that they run because they care passionately about an issue. And that's what gets them engaged in the political process. We talk a lot about the fact that when we ask men and women who serve in state legislatures, why did you run in the first place? The men will say, I ran in the first place because I've had a long-standing interest in politics and political career. And women say they ran because of a public policy issue. The shorthand for that is that women run to do something and men run to be somebody. And I think that is really how we kind of lose that sense of ambition. I think that when men run because they say they've always wanted a political career, that's what we define ambition as. But in fact, I think caring about a policy issue and then figuring out a way to do something about it is another way of thinking about it. We also know that women tend not to run unless somebody asks them. We have found that when we ask men, and we've asked this question now for a number of years on various surveys of elected officials, the men are much more likely to say that they ran without anybody suggesting it to them. It was completely their idea, whereas women need to be asked, and they need to be asked multiple times. I know you will be shocked to know that many men who serve in politics wake up one morning, look in the mirror, and say, I would be the best state legislator or the best member of Congress that my state has ever seen, and they just run for office. Women need to be asked to run. And we also know that women are less likely to be asked to run by the political party structure. So all of this kind of working together, makes for that decision to run for office to be so much harder, which is why we started to do our 2012 project back in 2010, working towards 2012, which was to start asking women to run and asking some different kinds of women to run, not just the usual suspects, but talking to teachers, talking to social workers and business women and entrepreneurs and scientists and technologists, and trying to cast a broader net. And I think that is really the key. It did make a difference. We saw more women running for the legislature. We saw more women running for Congress than ever before. We were part of a national effort to put the media spotlight on this issue, and that also made a difference. But it can't just be in one election cycle. This has to be sustained, and I think new strategies have to be developed in order to make sure that we are getting more women to run and therefore getting more women to win. And I think all of it goes back to the issue of impact. I mean, we don't do all of this counting and monitoring and seeing where women are in politics just for the sake of counting beans. I wouldn't have spent 30 years of my life doing it for that alone. We do it because of the research that shows that it matters to have more women there, that they change the public policy agenda. So all of this is about how do we make government more representative? How do we make our democracy more representative? How do we get more women at the table so that all of the voices of the citizens, not just of New Jersey, but nationally, are represented when public policy is being made? So that's a little of what we've learned over the years, but now I'm going to do a little bit about what's coming up, because New Jersey, because we are a state that always is in an election cycle, right? We can never not be running. It's exhausting. If you do what I do, it's exhausting. But it's also very exciting. And this year, there will be a gender component. There already seems to be a big gender component to this story. So I want to just tell you a little bit about what's happening in this election cycle for women, both within the legislature and legislative candidacies, the gubernatorial election, and also the women's vote. So I want to just tell you a little bit about what's happening. You know, as I said, we are now 11th in the nation for the percentage of women in our state legislature. We were at 10th before the last election, but Connecticut, because all the other states had elections, we did not. They moved up a little bit. So now we're in a fight with the state of Connecticut to see if we can get back in the top 10. We will be losing Barbara Buono in the Senate, so we will be down at least one woman in our legislature come this election, because she has to give up her seat in order to run for governor. She is in the 18th district, which is Middlesex County. It actually happens to be my district, so I'm paying a little bit more attention than usual to it. The assemblyman from that district, Assemblyman Barnes, Peter Barnes, is going to be moving up, undoubtedly will win that Senate seat. It's a very Democratic district. He's got the party nod. We can talk a lot about how the party really decides everything in this state, and oftentimes before the primary even happens, but we can talk about that later. So there is an open assembly seat in the 18th district. It's kind of a free-for-all in Middlesex County right now. When the party boss from Middlesex County, John Lynch, went to jail, we had a little bit of party chaos in Middlesex County. And so now, unlike the old days when John Lynch would decide who was going to run and that was it, now it's a little bit of a free-for-all. So there are a lot of people who are running for it, but in the mix are two women, a woman who's on the council from East Brunswick and a woman who's on the council from Highland Park. I think one of those two women actually will get it, probably the woman from East Brunswick. It's a much bigger town, so there may be a woman running there. I know you're having Mark Alexander here next week or next month, but he is challenging Senator Nia Gill. Senator Gill is facing, once again, a serious primary. Senator Gill kind of disobeyed the party machinery by running for the U.S. House when Donald Payne's seat opened up because of his death. They didn't want her to run. She ran anyway, and I think part of her punishment is now there's a question of whether she will get the party line and whether or not, and she in fact may be challenged in the primary. She has a history of running offline and winning, but that will be I think that will be a race to watch. Down in District 7, which is way down in South Jersey in Burlington County, Senator Diane Allen, who is a moderate Republican, who's been in the Senate for quite a while, started out in the Assembly. She was a former newscaster from Philadelphia. She may in fact be challenged from her right by Tea Party candidates. She voted in favor of same-sex marriage, and she may be having to pay the price for that by being primaried. So we will see what's going to happen in that race. We're also seeing some repercussions in a positive way, I think, of having a woman running at the top of the ticket, likely to be the nominee, I think fairly certain to be the nominee on the Democratic side with Barbara Buono, that the Republican Party is encouraging, seems to be encouraging more Republican women to run for the state legislature this time around. So down in the 1st District, way down south, Cape May County, we've got 2 women who may be running down there as challengers to the incumbent Democrats. One is a freeholder, one is a public relations specialist, but they may be, looks like they are running there. In the 3rd District, where Steve Sweeney, who is the Senate president in New Jersey, he is likely to be challenged by a woman named Nikki Trunk. And because New Jersey politics is always interesting, she was the mayor of Harrison, New Jersey. Then she resigned to go work for the controller's office, resigned as mayor. Now she's resigning from the controller's office to go to run as a candidate. And the Democrats want an investigation of the whole thing because they think maybe she was actually talking about running for office while she was still on the state payroll. So that should be interesting. And then up in the 39th District, we have an incumbent who you may be following this a little bit more because I think it's a little further up. It's in Bergen County. As an assemblyman who has been apparently kiting checks, a check kiter, and he is now. It sounds like he's not running, although for the longest time he wouldn't actually say if he was running or not running, but he's a Republican, and so the Republicans are lining up to run for that seat, and among the group of 5 candidates, there are actually 2 slots. There's an incumbent woman there who's running for re-election, and then a woman named Karen Mastriano, who's a Saddle River Council president, and she is running, although I think that's a tough fight. There will be more. There will be more women, besides the incumbent women who are likely to be all running for re-election, except for Barbara Buono. The filing deadline isn't until April, but I think we'll be seeing a lot of activity, and with any luck, we'll manage to get back into the top 10. I think that it will be interesting to watch this gubernatorial election through a bit of a gendered lens, and we certainly will do that at the Center for American Women in Politics for the next 6 or 8 months. It's been fascinating, and I don't know how much of this you've been following, but that sense that out there it was anybody but Barbara from the perspective of the Democratic Party leadership. Barbara Buono has been somebody who has been pretty outspoken. She hasn't kind of played along with the boys, and she's paid a price for that. So she was the Senate Majority Leader. She stood up to Steve Sweeney, the Senate President, when Steve Sweeney was actually siding more with the governor on some issues. She stood up. And she lost her position as Majority Leader in the state Senate. And I think she's been somebody who has spoken her mind. She says herself, sometimes I've ruffled feathers, but that's okay. But she has been somebody who has stood up. And I think it has created this sense where, as you watch what has happened over the last few months, when there's been a lot of jockeying about who will run, all of the party leadership was saying Cory Booker, Cory Booker, Cory Booker. Cory Booker didn't want to do it. Then even though Barbara was sort of sitting there saying, I will do this, right? And this is a tough fight, right? I mean, Barbara Buono knows this is an uphill battle and a tough fight. And, frankly, in many ways, you would think that the Democrats would be happy to have anybody who was willing to take this on. But when Cory Booker didn't want to do it, Steve Sweeney and George Norcross, who frankly hate Dick Cody, they were all willing to go talk to Dick Cody and see if he would run because they couldn't bring themselves to go to Barbara Buono. And so I have to read to you this endorsement because Krista liked this endorsement so much. It was probably one of the more bizarre endorsements I've ever read. So George Norcross, as you all may know, is sort of the power boss down in South Jersey. There's a mix of power bosses up here in North Jersey, and they're all, it's a very interesting combination because the Democratic bosses seem to really be on board with the Republican governor. So it's a very complicated mix of things. But finally, when it looked like there was nobody else to run. George Norcross says this. He described Barbara Bono as a, quote, high-quality candidate and said, in the absence of anyone else, Democrats should unite behind her. That was the ringing endorsement of George Norcross. But, you know, you have to say that Barbara Bono came out before everybody else. When nobody else was willing to do it, everybody was waiting to see would Cory Booker run or wouldn't he, and waiting to see if they would throw their hat into the ring. I mean, I think Steve Sweeney wanted it, but I think has thought better of it. She just did it. She didn't wait. And, you know, it's one of those great lessons that I think we talk to women about all the time. So I'm very impressed with that sort of stepping out and doing it. She's having still tremendous trouble, even within her own party. She's getting all of the endorsements now. The county party chairs are lining up behind her. But how she will build that momentum is tough, because there's still this kind of infighting. And I think in many ways, some of the real strong party leaders are happy with the way things are and really don't necessarily want change at the top. There was an article in the Daily Beast about Barbara's run. I don't know if any of you read the Daily Beast online. It has got some great stuff in it. And they did a wonderful piece about her and how the party is kind of not coalescing quite the way it should. And they got a lot of off-the-record quotes from some top Democrats, but this was actually one of my favorites about her. And I think this is what we're going to be watching for particularly, which is whether or not she, you know, and it's not even going to be, I think, so much in this state how the media treat her, but how her own party treats her and how gender comes up in it. So here's the quote. She kicked this is from an unnamed high-level Democrat. That's how it was framed. She kicked the governor in the crotch at every opportunity, and that is how she became known. But she is also the default candidate, said one top Democrat. It was 2 a.m., the bar was closing, and Barbara was looking pretty good. This is her own party. So I think that this is some of the challenge that she's going to face. Now, I think that she's also a really fascinating contrast to Chris Christie. I mean, just even, you know, if you can imagine the debate, right? If he will even, how many he will have. I think he's required to do one debate. But, you know, just physical difference in the two of them. I mean, Barbara, have you ever seen Barbara Bono? She's she's about my height and about half my weight. And she's very strong and a very strong presence, but I just think that it's going to be a really interesting dichotomy. So I think if you study this from a gendered perspective, this is going to be fascinating to watch. I think that how his persona comes across with a woman opponent, I think is going to be fascinating to watch. I think that there's some of that anger and the kind of, you know, what people seem to like about him, which is that kind of straight shooter, and I tell you what I think, how that's going to come across against a woman opponent will be interesting. I think his advisors will be telling him he has to kind of keep that under control with her. I would think that on the other side, they may well be trying to get him to get mad with her in some public way. I don't know if you remember, he got some pushback and some flack when he got angry at Loretta Weinberg. You know, and Loretta Weinberg is in her 80s, and he told the press, you know, I wish you'd take a bat to that woman. You know, that kind of thing, I'm not sure how that will play out. The reality is that right now he is riding high. Your own poll has shown him with something like a 74% approval rating. And that cuts across party. I mean, Democrats less likely than Republicans, but still. But it's going to be an uphill battle. And whether she can get the kind of traction and the visibility, I think that nationally the Democrats are going to start to put some money into this race, because I think the Democrats are going to feel like if they're going to face Chris Christie in 2016, they would rather he not be as strong as he is right now. Emily's List, which is the PAC, Emily's List, you all know what Emily's List is. Early money is like yeast. It makes the dough rise. For early money for women candidates, pro-choice Democratic women candidates, they've just endorsed Barbara Buono. That will bring in money. That will bring in some money. And it says something about her race, because they have a huge issue about viability. They don't like to give to non-viable candidates. The other thing she has going for her is that there are only 2 statewide elections this year, Virginia and New Jersey. Barbara is the only woman running in any of these races for governor, in either of these 2 states for governor. So all of that attention will be on her race. That said, this is a tough one, and I know, and I'm sure she knows that. She's not at all naive. I think we will also be watching the gender gap. How are women voting differently in this race than in others? So far, we have been seeing there's been a gender gap for Chris Christie's entire time in office. Sandy came. It went away. It's coming back, about an 8-point gender gap, but women are still quite supportive of Chris Christie and the job he's doing. Whether or not Barbara Buono can get the message out that she wants to get out, whether she can raise the money, whether she can get on the media, whether she can counter the kind of positives that the governor is now experiencing, is really the question, and really what we'll be watching. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen, and I would love to hear questions if we have time.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. I'm now going to open the floor for questions and answers. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll approach you with the microphone. We have the first question right here.
I have been repeatedly asking Emily's List, where are the New Jersey people? I have never gotten an answer from them.
When you say where are the New Jersey people, meaning the New Jersey candidates that they're endorsing?
Yeah, that Emily List was supporting, and we never had any until we had one woman from South Jersey.
Who ran, Shelley Adler, who ran
yeah.
for the House, right.
That was it.
Yeah.
Since I can remember, and I've belonged to Emily List forever.
Yeah.
So why, in your opinion, considering CORP, of which I was a member for years, is in New Jersey, is it the mafia state that gets in the way?
Of getting women elected?
Yeah. No, getting women to run.
Oh, well,
Because as you say, the county boss, the county system.
Yeah, I think that the key reason in New Jersey, I think a lot of what I just talked about why women do and don't run, is the national story. And I think New Jersey has a piece here that's a little bit different. And I think it is the way our party system is set up. So there are county party chairs, and sometimes it's the county party chair that has the power, and sometimes it's somebody who isn't even elected who has the power. So you have to, with the exception of a couple of counties, Morris County is one of them. They run, there's not a party line. But in almost all of the counties, you have to get the nod from the party in order to be on the party line. And if you don't get the party line, it's very tough to get elected, because in effect what happens is the party endorses pre-primary. In most states, the primary is open, and once you win the primary, then the party kind of gets behind you and supports you. In New Jersey, the party steps in long before then. So there may be a county party convention. It may be an open convention. It may be a closed convention. Doesn't matter. Those party bosses are keeping power very close. And this is true for both the Democrats and for the Republicans. So this is one of those things that unites women in politics in New Jersey. It has been the reason that they've been able to work together across party lines, not always on policy issues, but on this issue of getting more women into office, because women in both parties experience this. So if you can't get that party line, it's really, really tough. And the men are support, and if you look at who the county party chairs are, there are 21 counties, so there are 42 county party chairs, right? I think there may be 4 or 5, maybe 6 right now who are women. A few of those are women from, they're the chair of the party that doesn't have a snowball's chance of winning, so it's easy to have a woman be the party chair. And they keep that power very close. And it's because they actually don't care that much about congressional races. They care about local races, county races, and state legislative races, because that's where the power is, that's where contracts are, that's where money is, that's where it all happens. And so breaking into that system has been really tough for women. It's been tough for outsiders of any kind. Now, I'll tell you, it's also why, on the Republican side, you haven't seen some of the influx of, in the old days, you didn't see an influx of the Christian right coming in, and you don't see as much of the Tea Party coming in, because those party bosses keep it tight. But you also don't see women and people of color flooding in because they keep it tight and they keep it close.
Have you ever thought of running?
I'm a queen maker.
Somebody had their hand up over here.
Hi. Where are all these women that you're trying to get to run for office? Are they trapped in a specific job sector?
Well, the women who are in office now are more likely than their male counterparts to be teachers and kind of the allied healthcare professions, social workers, maybe nurses. More and more of them are attorneys, if you look at the women who are in Congress. But it's different than men. Men are much more likely to be attorneys or business people. We don't see that, and which is another reason why the fundraising issue comes up for women more, because the women tend to come from professions that aren't as moneyed. So, if you go to your colleagues and your colleagues are all lawyers in a big firm, versus if you go to your colleagues who are social workers or teachers, there's just more networks of money. One of the things that we've tried to do, both with our Ready to Run program, which is the nonpartisan campaign training that we run here in New Jersey, and by the way, we run in 14 other states with partners, we really encourage our partners, and we do it ourselves, is to try to go to some different pools of women and kind of cast a broader net. And we certainly did that in the 2012 project, where we tried, when we went to speak with the Society of Women Engineers, and when we went to them and said, we'd love to come and present at your annual meeting about engineers running for office, they were like, nobody has ever said, we should run for office. But they were intrigued, and we went. And a couple of those women did decide to run for their state legislature. And our thought was, and the reason that we talked about this, is that government is a place, first of all, it's the place where systemic change is made. So that's why we want more women in that level, engaged in that way, not just in service on the outside, but inside. But there are challenges that government is facing now that requires different kinds of expertise. And I think lawyers, I don't want to offend anyone in the room who's a lawyer, I think lawyers bring tremendous expertise and they should be at the table, but there are all kinds of other expertise that government could use. So if you thought about the BP oil spill, right, it would have been, I think, a terrific thing if there were more folks who maybe were environmental engineers, who were in Congress at the time, who might understand a little bit more of what went on, what was going on, and how to deal with that problem, and moving forward, how to legislate around that issue. So it's also a value added to government to have not just women at the table, but women who bring a whole nother set of expertise to the table.
Take the next question here.
Hi. Were you surprised that the U.S. elected a African American before a female as president?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't surprised. I think it was interesting to watch that election, and I thought, as somebody who cares about representative democracy, it was, it was a frankly, I think, a proud moment to see one of the two parties choosing between a woman and an African American. And so I was fascinated. What was more interesting to me in looking at that was to see how the two of them were perceived in some ways. And I think having Barack Obama was perceived and electing an African American, I think particularly among young people, was really perceived as history. Whereas I think electing a woman wasn't seen quite so much as historical, as historic as it would have been. And I think you saw that especially among young women. If you looked at where women fell out on the Clinton-Obama spectrum, right? Women, I would say sort of my age and above, were quite taken with the concept of Hillary Clinton running for president and getting elected. And I think for a lot of us, there was that notion that, a lot of women, I think, stopped believing that it was possible in their lifetime. And I think that as she progressed in her candidacy, it started to seem real, and that maybe that could happen. I think for a lot of young women who've grown up with their mothers working outside the home, they've seen women in leadership positions, it didn't seem as big to them. I also think Hillary Clinton might have been seen, for a lot of voting age young women, I think the Clintons felt old. I don't mean old like old that they were old, but that they were used to Clintons. I think Obama felt fresh and new and really, really different. And I think he had, look, he ran an incredible campaign. I think her campaign, didn't figure it out until it was too late. I think she was advised by some folks who told her to kind of run away from the I'm a woman candidate, which you can't really run away from it because it's pretty obvious. And I think when she finally kind of got comfortable with it herself, it was too late. But we'll see what happens in 2016, right?
What is available for coaching and advising for women who want to run for office?
Well, you can go to the Center for American Women in Politics website, which is cawp.rutgers.edu, and we maintain, you can see it right on our homepage, a resource map for women who want to run for office, who are interested in politics. So it's a state-by-state map. You click on your state, you look at the resources that are available. Some of them are state-based programs like our Ready to Run program that are nonpartisan. Some are partisan programs. Like in New Jersey, there used to be something called the Christy Todd Whitman Series for Excellence in Public Service. It's part of a national series for Republican women, regardless of where you stand on any issue. There's something called Emerge America, and it's in about 14 states now, and they're working on starting one here in New Jersey for Democratic women who want to run for office. We list all of the PACs that are out there, the leadership training programs. Some of them are for women exclusively, some of them are for men and women. Some of the campaign trainings that we put up on that website, on that resource list, some are just for women, some are for women and men. We also have national organizations up there that are working to get more women elected to office and provide different kinds of resources, whether it's money, whether it's coaching, whether it's training. We know that women who run for office are more likely to run after they've done some kind of a training. So for instance, our Ready to Run program, which by the way, I'll do a plug for that, is March 22nd and 23rd. It's a great, there are 2 tracks in that program. One is for women who know they want to, they're ready to run, they're going to do it in the next year or 2. And there's another track for women who are just starting to think about running and like, maybe I want to do that, but I'm not so sure, kind of get your toe in the water. That program we find that about a third of the women who go through that program run for office, and 70% of the women who do it win. The biggest challenge for women is getting that sense of confidence. Honestly, I think that most of the women who come to our program or to any of these campaign trainings could do it before they do the training, but we're good girls. We feel like we have to take the class and get the little certificate in order to actually do it. So that's why it's so important that those programs exist, and that women participate in them. So if you are at all interested in participating in that, please come see me afterwards. I would be happy to get your name and your email, and I will send you the registration material.
First, thanks for what you're doing, because I really feel an absence of civics training in education today and in general, and I think what you're doing is all the more important for that reason. Now, you spoke about the differences between men and women in governing styles and legislative styles. Would you perform a thought experiment and consider the different governing styles that might have worked out if Hillary Clinton versus Barack Obama had been elected president?
Well, I think even watching them in the debates, I think you saw sort of some different styles. But I think that the thing about Hillary Clinton that is probably different than Barack Obama is I think she is, in many ways, more like her husband in that style of that kind of people-to-people contact and really loving that. And I think what you've seen with Barack Obama is he's a little bit more reserved. There have been some complaints about that, and has that contributed to some of where we are right now with Congress? I'm not sure I believe that, but that sense of really enjoying that going up to the Hill and spending time with other members and talking to them one-on-one and opening the doors of the White House and making sure that you're inviting members of Congress up to over to the White House, to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, and talking. And I think there you would have seen some difference in style. I'm not sure it's on policy, but I think it's probably on that style piece. I think that is a big part of who she is, and I think it's a big part of who he's not. And so I think that may play out. I want to just say one thing about what you said about civic engagement, because we are starting a new project actually with the White House. So we're really excited about this. We're calling it Teach a Girl to Lead, and we were approached by the White House because about a year and a half ago, President Obama issued a challenge at the UN General Assembly to countries around the world to do more to empower women globally. And Hillary Clinton then put together something called the Equal Futures Partnership, which is about 14 or 15 countries now who have signed on. And each one of those countries is making commitments to do programming initiatives to empower women, both politically and economically. And in the United States, among the initiatives that are being launched, there's some in the area of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and women in STEM. Women in violence against women, doing more to prevent violence against women, more for women business entrepreneurs. But one area that they want to focus on is women and political empowerment, particularly girls, K through 12, and then college women. And they approached us to work with us on an initiative to do that. And so we're doing something called Teach a Girl to Lead, which is going to be an online resource for teachers, educators, and youth-serving organizations and their leaders of those youth group organizations to do two things. One is to bring public leadership, to that kind of whole girl power movement that's out there. You know, you've all seen this, girls can do anything and be anything, but we want them to also be encouraging one of those things that girls can be are elected officials. You know, we want little girls to grow up thinking that they're as entitled to be president of the United States as little boys. We think that's a good sense of entitlement, and we want both boys and girls to have that experience. And then we're also trying to build into the world of civic engagement, civic education, K through 12 and in college, not just learning about civics, but learning about women's role in politics and teaching girls in classrooms and boys in classrooms that public leaders can look like their mothers as well as their fathers. And so we're working on developing resources for teachers and for youth-serving organizations, activities that they can do, whether it's how to do a state house trip with your fourth grade class that has a gendered perspective to it, or whether it's how to think about community service and linking community service to politics for Girl Scout troops, or whether it's, we're also going to develop a national resource of elected women officials who say they are willing to go in and talk in classrooms and schoolrooms to Girl Scout troops and Boys and Girls Clubs all over America, and make those women's, you know, how you reach those women easy for educators and youth-serving organizations. So we're trying to do our part to make sure that we empower girls and young women to think about politics and public leadership.
I've got 4 daughters and 4 granddaughters, so I like that idea.
You're our favorite allies, men with daughters. Ooh. They get it. And you have one that's going to run? Good. Send her to me.
We'll take
That's just send her to me anyway.
the next question over here.
Hi, the question is actually more of perception, because I heard you say something about women, you know, having not so much confidence with regard to, you know, the analogy you used about the asparagus.
Right.
And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, the person wasn't as confused as they were informed. It's almost kind of like saying, okay, the male person would say, sure, I'll jump off of, you know, I'll jump off of that diving board, and the woman is saying, well, wait a minute, what's the length between the diving board and the ground, and then how many feet of water is it before we go into it, because, you know, what are the ramifications? So my thought process was there was more an
They're
informational
smarter.
process that was going on than there was
Yeah.
confidence, but then doesn't that speak to perception?
Well, you know, I think that there's a healthy kind of cautiousness.
I see.
And then I think that there is the sense that I think women are sort of taught to be more cautious to the point where it can keep you from taking the kind of risks you need to take. So, for instance, I got a lot of calls right around the time that Anthony Weiner was taking photographs of himself and tweeting them. And, you know, whenever there's one of these stories, I get a lot of calls. And I get the calls about, you know, so, you know, do you think that women would do, you know, and no, I do not think that, and we see this over and over again, and it's that kind of crazy risk-taking, right, that causes them so much trouble. So at the time that happened, we were in the midst of our new leadership program. So I'm standing there in front of these 35 young women from across the state of New Jersey, and we're talking about why they should be more engaged in politics. Well, the background noise was Anthony Weiner in these pictures. But at the same time, it wasn't just Anthony Weiner. So in the 4 months up to then, we had Anthony Weiner, we had Mark Sanford and his hiking of the Appalachian Trail. We had Arnold Schwarzenegger and the housekeeper and the baby. And we had John Edwards back again in court. So we had and we had, I'm blanking on his name now. In France, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, right? So we had 5 of these things going on at once. And this is actually why you want more women in, because not the kind of cautiousness that keeps you from saying yes to opportunity. That's not a good thing, right? But what is a good thing is when you look at something and think about risk and reward and whether this makes sense. And, there have been studies about boards, corporate boards, having more women on them, and that the behavior and the corporate decisions are less risky. In Norway, they require a certain percentage of women on their boards for just that reason. One of the reasons, one of my favorite sort of lines about this is, if Lehman Brothers had been Lehman Sisters, maybe the banking industry wouldn't have done to America what it did, right? I mean, these were places where men made, and they were men who made really risky decisions that jeopardized all of us, right? That cost us all a lot of personal money and the entire economy. So I think there is that kind of healthy cautiousness, or cautiousness is, but I think sort of sensibleness and smarts. But then there's, why wouldn't you just say yes to being on the asparagus board? I mean, nothing bad's going to happen. And that ability to just say yes, but it is that sense of, I haven't taken my class in asparagus yet, or I haven't taken my class in running for local council, so I can't possibly do it. I once gave a talk in Hamilton Township, and for Women's History Month, and it was this room full of women in a small space and I never end a talk, I should have said this here, I hope some of you are going to run for office in this room, without doing that. And this woman raises her hand and says, well, I want to run for local council, but I only have my master's in something, I forget what it was, but not in political science. So I think I have to go, before I run, I have to go back to school and get at least a BA in political science to be on the local council. And there's a guy sitting next to her who's the sheriff. And I'm telling you, he had not gone to school and studied political science. And he didn't have a moment's hesitation when he decided to run. That's the kind of thing that, I wanted to lean across the room and shake her. That whether that's whatever it is, and that's why we do Ready to Run. Because if I can get 200 women in a room, which is what we'll do in a couple of weeks, and have them meet Mike Duhame, who is the man who, one of the 3 people that Governor Chris Christie relies on most for his campaigns. He's a phenomenal political strategist, and he spends a morning talking to women who are going to run in the next couple of years about how to organize and put together a campaign. We have a session on social media, on how to deal with the regular media, how you present yourself, fundraising, how to navigate through the political party system. In a day and a half, women come out feeling like, okay, I could do it. That's all it takes.
I have just one more question, because we were talking about Chris Christie's popularity. Now it's just really through the roof. Were he a woman and he presented himself exactly in that manner, with your, yeah.
In what way are you, or do you
Well,
mean?
I'm going, he has a very direct sort of,
Right.
This is what the story is, this is where I am, this is what, I'm not making any excuses, I'm presenting this, to you as it is. I'm not making it
Yeah.
sweet, I'm not covering it up. Women, sometimes when they do that, they're perceived in a very aggressive manner. Gee, she shouldn't have that much testosterone or something
Right,
like that.
right.
It's all kind of negative.
Right.
What's
She was
your-
asking
what's your-
if a woman presented herself in the way that Chris Christie presents himself, in terms of that kind of self-assured, direct, straight talking, how would that be perceived? I think that would be a big challenge for a woman. I spent a lot of the last 2 years traveling, and it's really been striking, whether people are Democrats or Republicans around the country, when they hear that I'm from New Jersey, they can't stop talking about how taken they are with our governor. And he is, whether you agree with him or you disagree with him, he is a political talent. And I think that right now this country is starving for that person who will be direct and straightforward and speak their truth. You know, whether you agree with it or not, you have to believe when he's talking about all of these things, he means it. And I think it goes against that whole image of politicians as, you know, never telling you what they really think. You know, they'll say whatever they need to say to get ahead. And I think he conveys what he's conveying in a way that makes people feel like he is absolutely being the real deal with them, and they want that. I think that a woman who could convey that would be well received, but I think she would have to do it in a different kind of a way. And I don't know how that will play. I don't know that what he does in New Jersey at town hall meetings will play well around the country. I think that what he does when he's on MSNBC with Joe Scarborough in the morning, or how he is with Piers Morgan on CNN when he does those interviews, that's a different style than what he does in those town hall meetings. And I think you have to look at that differently. But we were talking about this at Eagleton a couple of weeks ago when Krista was there for this meeting, and we were talking about how he comes in and teaches, he comes into a class on campaigns every year, New Jersey campaigns, and it's extraordinary. I mean, he speaks to those students in the most direct and clear way without a note in front of him. He will talk to them for 2 hours. He will answer every single question. And he does it, I think, with complete honesty and sincerity, and that comes across, and everybody in the room is quite mesmerized by the time he leaves. So it is a style. I think what happens if a woman is aggressive, that would be tough. I don't see a woman being able to do, you know, the thing on the boardwalk with the ice cream cone. And that actually didn't play so well for him either, honestly. That didn't. I mean, the places where he's really gotten pushback, that kind of situation, I don't know if you saw what he did with the student down in Camden who turned out to be a veteran, a Navy SEAL. You know, those things have not played as well. But, you know, in his town hall meetings, if somebody's interrupting him and he just comes, I'm not sure a woman could pull that off, because there is that double standard still. You know, that even the language that's used to describe somebody displaying the same behavior, you know, it's assertive for men, it's aggressive for women. And that is a challenge for women candidates still. I think it depends. I think it depends on the setting, and I think he is. We were in the State House with our new leadership students, and he stopped. He was walking through the lobby of the State House. He stopped and talked to our students. He stood there for 45 minutes, unplanned, and he was, you know, he has a lot of what people really liked about Bill Clinton. He has that capacity to be with you, and really with you, not looking past you to see who's the better person in the room that I could be talking to. And I think he loves it, and it comes through, and it's very natural. That is very natural for him. I think his temper is also very real and very natural for him. I don't think that's a show. I don't think it's like he puts that on. I think that's also who he is. So the question is, can he keep that in check? And again, I think in a race against a woman, that will be interesting to watch.
Ms. Walsh, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
This is all the time we have today.